Everyone, Rich Feltus here, recently retired grain analyst with a overview, what I call farm to table, a journey through the grain markets, and a little bit different than other farm to table talks in that we're going to be specifically focusing on grain and livestock markets. So let's start out with what a bargain food is in the United States. This is a very timely topic here right now because of the recent food inflation over the last several years. But despite that, our spending on a share of total disposable income, even though it's at a 3-decade high, it's still just a little over 11%, which is really, again, a bargain compared to what folks in China are paying as a percent of their disposable income for food. In Mexico, even more. When we get into India, it's almost a third of their disposable income is spent on food. And when you get into these African nations, it can be well over 50%. So again, we are blessed in this country to be very abundant in terms of food production. And beyond that, the technology for harvesting, transportation, processing, and distribution to the grocery stores. It's been suggested to me before I go forward on this presentation that I give a little bit of background on where I've come from, so you know where I'm going to in terms of my points and as we wrap this thing up. So in any event, it's just a quick review of my 50 years in the grain industry, starting out of graduate school, a couple of years as a grain merchandising, buying and selling grain to farmers, elevators, processors for a continental grain company, and then for nearly a decade, I had a very unusual job. There were only about a half a dozen of us in the country at this time that were doing this full-time, traveling the U.S. in the summertime, South America in the wintertime, to estimate crop size and give real-time reporting on crop conditions to our trading desks in Chicago, New York, Geneva, Tokyo, around the world. From there, I really settled into the bulk of my career, nearly 4 decades as a grain analyst for 3 different firms. And the last 3 firms, I was actually the VP and director of commodity research across all of the markets, livestock, metals, the softs, cocoa, coffee, sugar, crude oil, currencies, interest rates, and the dollar. In any event, we provided market analysis, trade recommendations across all of those markets, finishing up my career with R.J. O'Brien. These are just a few of the logos from these companies, most of whom are now extinct, except for the last one, R.J. O'Brien, which is now still the largest privately held futures commodity firm in the world. In terms of what we're going to look at here over the presentation, just a quick overview of the outline. We're going to talk about grocery prices initially. We're going to talk about 3 nations, which I think are really pivotal to the future of U.S. grain trade. Then we're going to talk about over the last 3 decades, and you'll see this throughout the presentation. I'm going to use a 3-decade timeline to talk about changes in grain production, use, exports. We'll have a little fun, take a break with a quiz on what crops are converted into. We're going to talk about the drivers in terms of yield productivity in the United States. And importantly, can our grain production keep pace with population growth? We're going to jump into the wheat market, topic 8, livestock market. We're going to talk about the farmer, how the grain gets from the farm to overseas locations, and get into my bailiwick as a grain analyst, the key factors driving price discovery, one of which, of course, is weather. And then we're going to talk about the futures markets, where we've been, where we are today, and then wrap it up with some challenges here facing the next Secretary of Agriculture. So starting out, topic 1, why are grocery prices rising if grain prices are falling? Great question. Well, number 1, the farmer receives only about 15 cents of every dollar you spend on food in the grocery store. Inflation has been a big driver of food prices, up 19% plus since January 21. Grocery prices alone up 23%, averaging a gain of nearly 6% per year. The big driver has been, of course, crude oil, which at the time of the last election was just $43 a barrel, peaking at $102 a barrel in May of 22. Today, it's just under $70 a barrel, still up well over 50% from what it was at the time of the last election. And of course, we've had a lot of deficit spending on the part of the government, new government programs, all of which prompting the Fed, of course, to give us 11 rate hikes, and only recently cutting the discount rate on 2 occasions, 3/4 of a percentage point. In terms of the biggest grocery price gain, that was actually in the year 2022, was up 10% that year with the convergence of the start of the Ukrainian war, avian flu, and that was the year, of course, with the biggest rally in crude oil. For 2025, next year, USDA forecasts about a 2.4% gain in food prices. In other words, about half of what we've been averaging the last 3 years. And for the 2024, which we're just wrapping up, food prices were up about 2.3%. So topic 2, some of the key players. China is particularly challenged. They have 22% of the world's population, only 9% of the world's arable land. So that marks them as major food importers across a broad range of commodities, as you can see here in your screen. And in terms of what lies ahead, GMO corn area, which really is not being used in China, they are starting to experiment with it. I don't like that term GMO, genetically modified organism. I prefer the term gene enhanced, but in any event, GMO is what is most commonly used. But they, as the largest corn importer in the world, would only need to take their corn yields up about 10%, and they wouldn't have to import corn anymore. And they can do that if they start planting more acreage to GMO, which is going to yield anywhere from 20 to 30% better than the varieties they're using. Their corn averages about 90 bushels an acre. Here in the U.S., we're well over 170 bushel an acre with our GMO corn varieties. Russia, another key player, they have absolutely stunningly doubled wheat production in 30 years. Their crop here this year in 2024 at 82 million metric tons versus 54 produced here in the United States. They are by far the world's largest wheat exporter, exporting over double the amount of wheat that the United States does. And this is coming out of nowhere in a very short period of time. You might recall when Putin moved into the Crimea, President Obama instituted sanctions on Russia. And in response to that, Putin said, and I quote, "We will bury you in wheat. We will bury you in wheat," unquote. And in fact, he's done that since 2014-15. He has doubled wheat exports here now in the current year ahead to 48 million metric tons. And finally, Brazil. The U.S. used to hold the mantle of top exporter of corn and soybean in terms of tonnage and global market share. Now, both of those titles go to Brazil. And in fact, even more threatening, ominous, challenging for the next Secretary of Agriculture, they can bring online another 70 to 100 million additional soybean acres by 2054. They've got 112 million bean acres in today. How much is 70 to 100 million acres? Well, we plant about 93, 94 million acres of corn here in the United States, and that's over a wide area, Minnesota to Missouri, Ohio to Nebraska. If anybody's ever traveled the Corn Belt, you know how much corn that is. They could do that all, add all of that in Brazil if the price is right for them. Now, moving ahead here, we are going to get into the next topic. But before that, just finishing up on Brazil, this is a photo of a farmer taking out soybeans in Brazil, multiple combines. A friend of mine has this particular farmer as a client. He's the largest soybean farmer in the world, largest in Brazil. and he farms 250,000 acres of soybeans. That's nearly 400 square miles of cropland devoted just to soybeans. And here's a graphic showing the bars actually show the steadily increasing production in Brazilian soybeans. And the line here actually shows the steady increase in acreage in soybean area in Brazil. And of course, here is the corn with the bars showing the steady increase in corn production and the line showing the steady increase in corn acreage. The production in corn is a little bit more erratic than soybeans in Brazil, and that's because the corn is planted after the soybeans in Brazil towards the end of the rainy season, and sometimes the crop just runs short of water in corn at the end of its growing season. Now, let's take a 30-year perspective of where we have come from in the U.S. grains in terms of what we've done in production and uses and the U.S. share of global export market in each of these commodities. The corn, very impressively, we've over doubled production over the last 3 decades. 3/4 of the crop is going to feed plus ethanol and the remainder to exports. Back in 1994, we had 55% of the global export market share in corn. Today, it's down to just 30%. Soybeans, much the same. I'm sorry, wheat, we're actually down 25% over the last 3 decades in wheat production. And there, the export market share is the most dismal of all. We're exporting only 1/3 of the amount of wheat in terms of global market share that we did back in 1994. And soybeans, very impressively, again, over doubling production. When a soybean comes out of the field, it's either crushed, 55% of the beans are crushed, the remainder are exported. When you crush a bushel of soybeans, you get 43 pounds of meal and 11 pounds of soy oil. I'm sorry, 44 pounds of meal, 11 pounds of soy oil. We'll talk about that oil in a moment. And the rest is exported. But nonetheless, here our export market share has been cut in half. We only have about 28% of global export market share in soybeans. 3 decades ago, we were 65%. What is soybean oil used for? Well, it goes into margarine. You can buy pure soybean oil off the shelf. It's, of course, a primary ingredient in many salad oils. But interestingly, a lot of the bean oil produced in the United States right now, 48% of it is going into fuel tanks in the form of additive for biodiesel. So some ethanol insights. This is a product that many of you use every day, or at least a few days a week. It's called E10, which means that ethanol derived from corn is 10% of the mixture of the gasoline you put in your tank. Almost all the gasoline sold in the United States contains ethanol, 10% corn ethanol blend. It represents over 1/3 of total corn usage in the United States. In terms of E10 mileage, it's 3 to 4% below what it would be for RBOB, that's pure gasoline. So essentially over 30 miles, you're losing a gallon a mile because of the E10 is not as efficient. And for a farmer that takes his corn into an ethanol processor, that bushel of corn yields about 2.7 gallons of ethanol per bushel. Here's what a bushel of corn looks like. And to put this in real terms, when you fill up any kind of a mid-size SUV, Honda CR-V or a Toyota, Hyundai, Tucson, whatever, when you fill that gas tank up with 14 gallons of fuel, you're putting in 1.4 gallons of ethanol. You're putting in about 1/2 bushel of corn into your gas tank. Now, take a little break here from all the stats. Let's give you a little quiz. Can you name the crop used to make perfumes, makeup, and I'll give you another hit, peanut butter. In fact, peanut butter is the second item on the label. that is corn. Corn is used to make all of those items here: perfumes, makeup, and peanut butter. What about shampoo and vitamins? Excuse me. Excuse me. It's also used to make candles, and that crop would be soybeans. And then finally, hair conditioners, golf tees. I might also add it's used derived for detergents, and that crop is wheat. So this isn't only farm to table; it's farm to the bathroom, farm to the shower, farm to the golf course. Here, that these three major crops we're talking about here are used to produce. Next topic here going forward, let's talk about yield productivity. This is a graphic showing the trend in corn yields in the United States. Again, going back here 30 years. The line through the center is the trend line. The left-hand scale is bushels per acre. This year in 2024, this has been updated just as of the November crop report released this month. We had a record yield of 183 bushels per acre. And let me just clarify here, when I talk about field corn here, this is the corn used for ethanol, for exports, for feed, for our livestock. I'm not talking about sweet corn. Again, U.S. corn acres, about 94 million acres planted this year. We plant less than 1/2 million acres of sweet corn, which we enjoy in the summer, corn on the cob, and then the balance is harvested and put in cans for use year-round. But this has been a very impressive innovation, technological achievement. The U.S. trendline yield in corn in the last 30 years is up 55 bushels an acre. That's a 44% increase in productivity. We're increasing corn yield at about 1.8 bushels per acre per year. What does that 55 bushel an acre mean to a farmer at $4 corn? Well, that means that farmer is making here about another $120,000 a year in terms of over a 500-acre cornfield in terms of additional gross revenue coming into the farm. Now, here's just a little bit of history on the trend in U.S. corn yields. Again, bushels per acre over here on the left-hand side. This goes all the way back to the Civil War. And you'll note that we're pretty much stuck here in the 25, 30 bushel per acre corn yield across the United States all the way through the Dust Bowl. And then something happened here in the mid-30s going forward. And we'll talk about that right now. It all started with the then Secretary of Agriculture under both Harding and Coolidge, a man by the name of Henry C. Wallace. He was a farmer from Iowa, and he was taking a train trip from Washington, D.C. out to his Iowa farm. And along the way was this group of farmers in DeKalb, Illinois, which I show here in the Orange County map, just a couple of counties east of Chicago. In any event, he stops off at that DeKalb train station and addresses the summer picnic of the DeKalb Ag Association. That was in 1923. And he issued a challenge. He said, we know how to do hybrid corn, but nobody's ever taken it to a commercial scale for use by farmers. We've done it in the lab, but we haven't gotten out on a widespread scale. So he challenges DeKalb Ag to start producing and selling hybrid corn. And so the next year they started working on it. In 1935, it took them 11 years to produce their first bag of hybrid seed corn. But for the next 4 decades, they were the leader in seed corn sales globally, U.S. and globally. And this is where the yield graph takes off with the use of hybrid corn. Amazing. So this is, if you've ever traveled the Midwest, this is the DeKalb label logo. Why the wings on the ear? Well, it was a marketing promotion that if you planted DeKalb corn, because of the higher yields and higher income, we will lift you out of mortgage debt. That was the angle they were using on farmers. Now, we're not done with this Wallace family here quite yet. Pioneer today is they sell 3 times as much seed corn, 3 times as much corn acreage is under Pioneer flags than DeKalb flags. And a little bit of history on that Pioneer. That was actually started by Henry C. Wallace's son, Henry A. Wallace, who also went on to become Secretary of Agriculture and under FDR. He was also a vice president under FDR. Right before he ran for his last term in office, he was viewed as too pro-Soviet, was kicked off the ticket, and for Roosevelt's successful 4th term, FDR, of course, brought on Henry Truman. And in any event, interesting here that father, son, both ag secretaries, number 1, and number 2, the son, went on to start the largest seed corn company here in the United States. Here is a graphic of the soybean yield. Again, bushels per acre over here on the left scale. And note the steady increase in soybean yields. This year, we were just a fraction short of the prior record yield. Nonetheless, an impressive performance given the dry finish to the many areas in the Corn Belt this summer. In terms of productivity gains, we have added 16 bushels an acre over the last 30 years to the soybean yield. That's a 46% gain in yield productivity. We're increasing the bean yield about a half a bushel per acre per year. For a farmer, that means about another $80,000 an acre gross income. I'm sorry, $80,000 over a 500-acre farm. All right, so we've just shown these impressive yields in corn and soybeans. What is driving it? Well, there's a host of items. We're going to touch on all of these: genetics, GPS, field tiling. This is drainage in the field to get the water off sooner in the spring so they can plant earlier and the soils warm up earlier. Certainly seed treatment has been a part of it, better equipment, higher plant populations, various chemicals here to keep the pests away from the crop, conservation tillage. Since 1982, soil erosion in the United States is down 34%. So in any event, genetics has been a big part of it. Field mapping, we're going to talk about that here coming up soon. Field tiling has been a big one. And this is how one technology really spawned an increase in another technology. This is a farmer putting in field tile. And this really boomed in the United States. Interestingly, in 1990, 1990 was the first year when combines were equipped with field monitors. That is to say, as the farmer is harvesting his crop, he can look at a gauge in the combine and it tells exactly what the yield is per acre at that particular spot. Well, what the farmers noticed is every time they went over a field tile, the yield monitor spiked higher. They were getting higher bushels in that particular spot. So, a light bulb goes on. Why don't we tile more? Why don't we tile fields we haven't tiled so far? So they started doing that. And that's really been a big boost to yield productivity. Seed treatment here is normal corn on the left, treated seed on the right, which keeps the birds and the bugs, the insects away, and it protects the seed in case you have rains after planting. That keeps the seed germ intact so it can germinate when conditions are favorable. This is a big one you're seeing more and more in the farmer Midwest. Tracks instead of tires. The whole idea here is to spread the weight of this heavy equipment over a wider area. Less compaction means more soil aeration, better water penetration, and with all of that, of course, higher yields. And I mentioned soil conservation. I can attest to this personally as a crop scout in the late 70s and the 80s. It was very common after a heavy rain to see portions of fields underwater or low spots in fields, even not after a heavy rain, to be underwater. Well, now with soil conservation, with field tiling, informed tillage, they are doing a lot better here in terms of productivity by just treating the soils better. Now, importantly, topic 6, can we keep up with population growth in terms of what we're doing with grain production? Great question. Well, over the last 30 years, again, starting in 1994, the global population is up nearly 2.5 billion. That's a 42% gain. We're now on the planet somewhere over 8 billion souls. Now, what has grain production done over those last 30 years? Well, it has more than doubled. It's up 116%. What about the future? Well, by 2050, that's 26 years ahead, we think the population growth will be up 1.6 billion. There's various estimates on this one. I picked the middle of the road estimate. That's a 20% gain, far below the 42% gain that we had in the last 30 years. Why? Largely because China's population is starting to decline. Global population actually peaked in 1963. We were gaining 2.3 million people per year that year. But today it's less than 1%. And by 2050, it'll be less than 0.5%. So answer the question, by all means, between gains in planted area, yield productivity, we'll easily be able to outpace population gains globally in terms of grain production. Now, some wheat facts to know that I think you'll find interesting. These are the maps showing where wheat is produced in the United States. The far upper left-hand corner is the winter wheat. That's the majority of production in the country. And the map in the lower right shows the green where the spring wheat is produced. It's not just really 2 types of wheat. It's 5 types of wheat. Your hard red winter wheat, which is the highest protein winter wheat used for breads and hard rolls and so forth. I circle the area out here in the southern plains. That's where your hard red winter varieties, again, basically planted in the fall, harvested in the early summer of the following year. And then we have the soft wheat that's produced in the Midwest. You can see where I've circled the Illinois states. I'm sorry, the Midwest states around the Great Lakes. And that's used in cereals. No secret that Kellogg locates in Battle Creek, Michigan, because they were a big soft wheat user for their cereals. And then we have the winter white wheat that's grown up in the PNW and the northwestern states of the country. And the Asians really like that stuff for their noodles. And so that a lot of that goes out through our Pacific ports. Now, the other type of wheat, of course, the spring wheat, which is planted in the spring, harvested late summer, that's grown here in the what they call the triangle: Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, western Minnesota. Primarily used for pizza flour, croissants. On any given day, 1 in 8 Americans is eating a pizza, a very popular food, of course. And durum wheat is grown in the same area as the spring wheat, and it is the highest protein wheat of all. And it's used, of course, for pasta. The top producing states in wheat in the United States are North Dakota, Kansas. So I, as a former crop scout, or even as a grain analyst, we were always watching the weather in these top producing states very carefully, and the yield prospects in those states. In terms of wheat production by country, this shows the top producers of wheat in the world. China is the largest, and the European Union, this is all 16 or 17 countries in the European Union, is a close follower, followed by India. Russia, the largest exporter, and the U.S. is a distant 5th. Now, to drill down a little bit deeper on this wheat market, I want to mention Norman Borlaug, Iowa farm boy, University of Minnesota graduate student and PhD in genetics. He developed high-yield, disease-resistant wheat right around the time that the world population was peaking in the early 1960s, doubling wheat yields in India and Pakistan, credited with saving 1 billion lives. What an achievement. And of course, because of that, just about every award, Nobel, Presidential Medal of Freedom, Congressional Gold Medal, were awarded to Mr. Borlaug. This is a photo of him crossing a couple of different strains of wheat. Now, this has nothing to do with GMO or gene enhancement. He's not bringing in other uh, stuff into the wheat market here. What he's basically doing is just crossing various types of wheat. And I lost that photo. We're going to go right back to it. Here we go. And this is what the AP said about him. He helped teach the world to feed itself. What a tremendous legacy. This is a photo of Dr. Borlaug on the right. I had the pleasure of meeting him at a USDA conference back in 2005. He was 91 at the time, looks better than I did at age 57. Very gracious gentleman. And really, the room lit up when this guy came in because everybody knew his legacy. Now, let's go to topic 8, livestock. This is actually a photo of my great-grandfather standing in the cow yard, Ferdinand Nagel. This is the farm that he bought. My grandfather is sitting on the white horse. This would have been my mother's dad. And he's standing here proudly with his dairy herd between milkings. And I thought it would be interesting to take a look at, back in around 1900, how much milk each cow produced per day. And the answer to that was about 1.5 gallons per day. And this is in 2 milkings. And hand milking in those days took anywhere from 20 to 25 minutes per cow. That's what a cow in 1900 gave a farmer. Today, it's 7.7 gallons per day per farmer on 2 milkings. That is done with a milking machine that takes only about 5 minutes to empty a cow bladder. What is driving this phenomenal increase in productivity in milk production? Well, certainly selective breeding, better feed formulations. They're feeding these cows, in a word, racehorse diets. All the literature here or YouTube videos talks about keeping these animals comfortable. And they don't let these animals get sick. I mean, they're very active on proactive veterinary care. And these milking machines, of course, are actually better for the cow than the hand milking was around the turn of the century. Now, to take it a little deeper, every dairy cow in the United States consumes about 110 pounds of feed and 35 gallons of water per day. So that works out. When you pull a gallon of milk off the shelf, the cooler in Publix or Walmart or Kroger, that 1 gallon of milk required by the farmer to feed him 14 pounds of feed and almost 5 gallons of water. So even though milk seems expensive at $4 a gallon, when you consider what the farmer has to do to produce that milk, for it to be refrigerated, pasteurized, bottled, delivered to the grocery store, it's still, I think, a very good value. Incidentally, the record cow production per day, it was a cow in India producing 19 gallons of milk per day. How about that one? Now, excuse me, moving into livestock, there's a lot of stuff here, but it's going to be very simple when I finish up with you. This basically shows domestic per capita meat use. Over here on the Y scale are pounds per person per year. And chicken is number one. Americans are eating 98 pounds of chicken per person per year, 57 pounds of beef, and 50 pounds of pork, and about 20 pounds of fish. That's shown on this graphic, but I looked it up. Okay, so let's go back here to the year 2000, the beginning of the current millennial, and just make some comparisons here. Since the year 2000, chicken use is up 23 pounds per person per year. Beef is down 11. Fish is up 3, and the pork is actually about the same. So when you look at it this year, 2024, total chicken, beef, and pork use per person is at about 205 pounds. And that's up 11 pounds since the year 2000. So we're eating very well, but the trends are very clear. We're eating more chicken, less beef, and about the same amount of pork. Now, just a quick thing on livestock. The average hog from birth to market lives about 7 months. The top producing hog state here is Iowa. There are 7.5 hogs per person in the state of Iowa. And in terms of the top states, Iowa, Minnesota are certainly the top leaders. In terms of cattle, beef cattle live a little over a year and a quarter. They are produced largely in the southern plains, west of the 100th meridian, which runs right about through here, the Texas Panhandle, West Kansas. Why? Because there's less mud out there. Beef is the only livestock produced really out in the outdoors, so the weather conditions are very important. And Texas and Oklahoma by far the largest producers. And then your chicken basically lives here about 23 weeks, and it's produced largely on marginal farmland, low productivity farmland, with the top producing states being Georgia and Alabama. And turkeys living about 20 weeks. I'm sorry, the chickens live 18 weeks. Turkey has a 20-week life expectancy. Minnesota and North Carolina are your top states. So some livestock insights. Okay, so why are we eating more chicken? Well, I think it's perceived as being healthier, but also beef prices are high. It's just a more affordable protein at the grocery store. And in terms of beef prices, right now we're in a cyclical decline in the hog herd, in the cow herd, which suggests beef prices are likely going to stay pretty sticky high for the next few years. And in terms of hog expansion here in the United States, I have a relative that is a large row crop farmer, hog farmer in Western Illinois. The last hog barn that he put up was about $700,000. Today, because of inflation, that same hog barn will cost over $1 million, and he would have to do it at a much higher interest rate, 7% plus, than what he paid to finance his last hog barn. So expansion on hogs in the United States is pretty much stopped. Who are the companies that produce our livestock products? Well, Tyson and most of Cargill, they are U.S. owned. The largest beef producer in the world is JBS, including the U.S. That's owned by Brazil. And Smithfield, the largest hog producer in the U.S. globally, that's all owned by China. So if we're going to grow out livestock production, we're really just going to have to export more. And there's plenty of room to do that. We only export 23% of the pork produced in the United States, 16% of chicken, 12% of beef production. And this is where U.S. trade reps, the U.S. trade representative is just a very important position in the cabinet. And their efforts to try whatever means they can to open up trade barriers that prevent our livestock producers, our livestock products from entering their nations. Topic number 9, let's get into some farmer insights. Here is a devastated field of corn. I would say this was probably hit by a severe hailstorm, and brings to point, where a banker is sitting on his side of the table when a farmer comes in this spring and asks for $250,000 or $1 million or $500,000 to finance the planting of his crop. And the farmer or the banker responds and says, well, why should I lend you a lot of money to plant your crop when this photo may signify where we are at the end of the growing season? You've got the money, but my depositors are out because you're not going to have any crop to pay me back with. Well, the farmer says, no problem, Mr. Banker. I've got crop insurance. And not only is it crop insurance, it is federally subsidized crop insurance, 62% of which is paid by the U.S. taxpayer. Now, we have, tried over the decades, my career, a number of different initiatives to try to supplement farm income in periods of crop disaster. This one really is the best that I've seen in my career. Even though it's expensive, it is a pretty good safety net that is not market distorting, and that's important. We're not storing up grain. We're not paying farmers to keep land out of production. We're not putting a lot of corn under loan on the farm. This basically lets the surpluses, if they do arise, clear at low prices. Not a problem, because because the farmer has a guaranteed with the crop insurance. Now, again, our 30-year timeline, how much is prime Illinois farmland up? It's up 5-fold, a very good investment. But contrast with the Dow Jones, in that same period, it's up over 10-fold. Now, talking about some equipment, this is a John Deere 2-row planter. This is the planter my dad used. It was really in production for over 3 decades, cost about $300. The seed was put in these bins here. When the cord is pulled, the planter drops down. These shoes create a furrow, and then the seed is dropped into the furrow, and these yellow wheels behind close the furrow up, and boom, the corn is planted. This thing cost, at the time, about $300. This is actually some of the items we pulled off of the family farm before it was sold after my mom died. This is a planter plate here that would reside at the bottom of this green seed bin, and each one of those notches represents a slot for the corn seed to reside. And as the planter rotated, as that planter plate rotated, it would go over an empty space, and gravity feed would drop the corn seed into the ground. Here is a modern corn planter today. This baby is a $500,000 event, 24-row corn planter. You might ask, how does corn seed get from these bins here in the middle all the way out to the end rows? Well, it's a series of blowers that blow the seed out to each of the mini hoppers, and then it's actually a vacuum system which pulls the seed from the planter plates and sucks it into the ground. Very high tech. And to just demonstrate that, we have a farmer here who is going to demonstrate some of the technology that is incorporated into these planters and the cabs that pull the planters. So listen up.
Yep, no seed in there. Okay, that was a super easy repair. I put the hose back on there, tightened the clamp on. Now watch this. This is really cool. This is one of the things I love the most about this precision planting system with individual electric motors on each row so that they can shut off themselves. Watch this. I'm just gonna turn around and get back on my GPS line, get headed back the other direction in the way that I was going. And after I get turned around here, I'm gonna set the planter down a little ways before the problem occurred. And since it knows where seeds have been dropped and where seeds have not been dropped, it'll just automatically fill in the problem. All right, I'm locked onto the guidance line. And you can just watch this happen right on the screen. I'm gonna go ahead and set the planter down right now. Watch this. This is awesome. It's only running those 2 rows right now, and then boom, the rest of the planter starts up. And you will never be able to tell later on in the year that we had a problem there with the planter. Guys, look what just happened. That little car just stopped in the field and dropped off this. I'm pretty happy about that. Let me give you a quick rundown of all these screens that are in the cab right now. This is the John Deere display. It's a 4640 model. This is the same screen that I had mounted on the Gator last week when I was driving around mapping the waterways and the borders around the edges of the field. And all we're using it for right now is auto guidance. It has the line set up on it, and it's driving the tractor so that I don't have to guess where to drive. Next up, we have the Precision Planting 2020 monitor. This is actually controlling the planter right now. I have loaded the maps of the waterways and the field boundaries into this monitor, and it's actually telling the rows when to shut off and when to turn on based on entering and exiting waterways and overlapping areas that we've already planted, like when we pull into an end row. This is the monitor that's in control of shutting each individual motor off that runs the seed discs on each row unit. It's also displaying a whole bunch of information for us right now. It's controlling and displaying the downforce, which is how much pressure is applied down to each row to keep it in the ground. It's showing us right now the furrow moisture, the soil temperature, the spacing, the singulation. Singulation is a metric that describes the percentage of times that one seed is dropped every time one seed is supposed to be dropped. Right here we're seeing skips and multiples. A skip is when we were supposed to drop a seed, but we failed to. And a multiple is when we dropped more than one seed in one spot. And that neither of those are good. We don't want to be doing that. It's displaying the ride quality and our vacuum on each side of the planter. And this is where I would go to control the downforce or to control the population if I wanted to change it. Okay, and up here on the iPad, probably all you're going to see is my reflection, but this is making a map. Right now we're looking at the singulation map, and we could look at maps of any of the things that we can see on the 2020 monitor. So I'm going to have to find a time when the sun isn't shining quite so good. Maybe at night would be a good time to show you all of the things I can do on the iPad, because that's really, really cool. We'll have to put that on the list of things to include in an upcoming video. It's just way too shiny right now to be able to show you all the cool stuff that this program can do on the iPad. Then up here is our control for our clean sweep row cleaners. This is run by air pressure, so I can raise and lower the row cleaners, and I can put down pressure on them if I want to. It's a really good system. We really like it. Right now I'm running just a little bit of down pressure on them. When I'm filling the planter, I like to leave 1 or 2 bags out on the platform.
There's more technology in a John Deere planter and in the cab than there is in a Tesla. Incredible. And this is what just part the GPS mapping, the improved machinery that's driving these yield productivity gains in the United States. What about transportation? Well, here is a combine unloading in the field. These large combines today have hoppers. That's what collects the grain in the combine, as much as 400 bushels. And these combines are $1 million plus events. The trucks unload it at a close by, close by elevator. Trucks hold about 1,000 bushels. And then from that elevator, the grain is, and that's what they call it, an elevator. It is elevated up and then dropped into either a rail car holding 3,500 bushels or into a barge holding 52,000 bushels. And by rail or barge, they are then taken down to the Gulf or over to the East Coast, the West Coast, and they are again elevated and put into ships. This is a Panamax vessel being loaded, ready for export, holding over 2 million bushels of grain. And impressively, when it arrives at its destination, they can unload a Panamax vessel at the rate of 72,000 bushels an hour. They can totally get every kernel of grain in that vessel out and on its way to its origin here at the country where it's exported to in about 2 days. Impressive. Now, these are some of the things that, this is my network here of determining grain prices. It is really, at the end of the day, boils down to our grain stocks at the end of the marketing year. Are they increasing, decreasing, or stable? In a abundant supply situation, you need to lower the price to clear the inventory. And incidentally, this applies across any commodity that you think of. Crude oil, rice, cotton, the metals, livestock. If you've got an oversupply, you need to cut the price and get rid of it. If you've got a short supply situation, you need a higher price to ration the demand. Weather is certainly a key driver during the summer months, and during the winter months, we're watching South American weather closely. That's their growing season. and increasingly so because of what I just told you about Brazil earlier. So in any event, some trading rules. When I first started in the grain business, I made a point of reading everything I could get my hands on in terms of trading strategies, price discovery, speculation, trading, wealth accumulation. And I came up with over 120 rules, but these are just a couple of them. If you're putting money on the line, you better not be doing it on somebody's tip or opinion. You better be doing it on the basis of facts. Another one that I like is simply following the trend. 80% of the time, any market that you can talk about is trending, either trending higher, trending lower, or it's range bound and going sideways. This is one of my favorites. I recall back here to a situation in the state of Iowa. This was in 1993, June, July, August. Their summer rains just in the summer were 31 inches. It devastated the corn crop. It was a 33-year low in the Iowa corn yield that year, only 65 bushels per acre. But in any event, as all of that was unfolding, the Today Show decided we're going to go right to where the action is. They were broadcasting from downtown Des Moines on a barge, and thought, wow, we're really catching the big news event of the year. Well, by the time that the Today Show got out there, the grain markets had already discounted the heavy rain, the lower yields, and prices were already heading lower. So just to underscore how quickly news and breaking news developments are discounted and factored into prices. And this is always an important one. If you get bullish news and the market can't go higher, that's a sign it's probably going lower. If you get bearish news and the market can't go any lower, that's a sign you ought to be buying that market. Certainly weather, as I mentioned, is the primary driver here in terms of grain yields, having a good crop, a poor crop. Interestingly, and then this comes from our weather meteorologist. Well, I'm retired now, but for over 30 years, we spoke with our consulting weather meteorologist. And this is a cut above. These people are a cut above the folks you see on TV. They only service commodity firms, large energy companies. The meteorologists they have on staff there are the best of the best. In any event, our top guy notes accurately that Midwest droughts are indeed less frequent than they were in the 80s and the 90s. And interestingly, of course, all of these models are mathematically based, computer driven. The short-term weather models have improved, but there's not much improvement in the long-term model accuracy. Case in point, your 24-hour forecast is pretty good, 90%. Same with the 48 hours. But when you get down to the 10-day forecast, it's no better than a 50% coin flip. Don't pack the cooler based on the 10-day forecast. So now this is an interesting graphic. A lot of data here, but we'll just simplify this. This is the Iowa June, August temperatures. It's just Iowa, just June, August. I show Iowa because Iowa is typically top one or two corn production states. The line through the center is the mean, the average temperature, summer temperature in Iowa. And let me show you a couple of things here. Here's where we are right now in terms of Iowa temperatures on this line over on the far right, where we've been topping out. Has it been hotter in the state of Iowa in the summer months? Well, yes, it has been. It was during the First World War. It was during the Dust Bowl days. And it certainly was hotter here in the 80s, the late 80s, than it is today. Now, having said that, importantly, it is worth noting that nighttime lows have been trending higher. This is the low temperature of that year. And you'll note that by this trend line here, nighttime lows have been trending higher in the state of Iowa. However, we saw that same trend in 1967 to 1978. Nighttime lows were trending higher. And what happened after that? Well, temperatures again got very erratic. So I think I'm not selling myself certainly as a meteorologist or as a climatologist, but I'm an analyst that can read a chart. I can read a graph. And what this tells me is that it's just very difficult to predict long-term temperatures because they are very erratic, even after what's seeming trends may have been established. Now, let's go back to 1983. This is a film, just a clip of a movie called Trading Places, starring Eddie Murphy, Dan Aykroyd. Eddie Murphy, amazing talent. He was only 21 at the time this movie was made. This was made, my goodness, over 40 years ago. In any event, this basically shows and illustrates the mechanics of how a futures order is handled in the pits. In this case, this is the New York Exchange, where your energy markets and the softs are traded. Let's just go through this.
Let's kick some ass. This is it, the last bastion of pure capitalism left on Earth. Here in New York, they trade everything. Gold, silver, platinum, heating oil, propane, cocoa and sugar, and of course, frozen concentrated orange juice. Now, the people on the phones are taking orders from brokerage houses all over the world. The runners then hand those orders to the traders in the pits. They're trading cotton over there. That's the silver pit. The Duke's trader is going to be buying like crazy right from the opening.
We'll be waiting until he drives the price up.
Right. I can't wait to see his face when they broadcast that genuine crop report. OJ trading opens at 9.
Let's go kick some butt.
Let's go. One, two, three, four, eyes home!
Hey, the Dukes are trying to corner the market.
They know something.
I can feel it. Let's get in on it.
200, take them. 200, 200. Go in. Not yet. Almost. 220, take them. 209. Yeah, got them. 140. Hey, today. Now. South Dakota for the 142.
That's not right. How can the price be going down?
Something's wrong. Where's Wilson?
What are they doing here?
They're selling, Mortimer.
Well, that's ridiculous. Unless that crop report... God help us. I told you we shouldn't have come in and everything, you asshole!
I gotta get Wilson and tell him to sell. capture.
Ladies and gentlemen, the orange crop estimates for the next year. After calculating the estimates from various orange-producing states, we have concluded the following. The cold winter has apparently not affected the orange harvest. Consumers can expect orange juice prices to fall should we demand.
Okay, so stuff is going on here that never happens. First of all, nobody gets a prior release of a January crop report. The Duke brothers thought they had a crop report that was going to be bullish, and they were driving up the price, buying everything. And the two stars of the movie knew that it would be a bearish crop report, and they started selling it. In any event, importantly, it shows the mechanics of the orders coming in from around the world. A runner takes into the pit broker fills it, and that's how futures trades were executed. So to take this point further, this is the floor of the Chicago Board of Trade, where the grains are traded and the interest rate markets. A lot of people down here, if you're lucky enough to be ownership of a membership in the Board of Trade, filling the orders, you made a pretty good living. So did the clerks, the runners, a lot of people here making a pretty good living. Well, the first standardized futures contract was actually introduced to the Board of Trade before the Civil War ended. And what is a futures contract? In very simple terms, an agreement to buy or sell a commodity at agreed upon price and delivery date. For example, in simplest terms, a farmer harvests his crop in 2 months, but he's got 10 months to market it. And he can use the futures markets to either lock in a better price if he wishes, or if you're an end user and you see a low price, you can lock that price in and guarantee that in terms of your cost of goods for a market that may go higher later. You're covered because you're locked in at a low price. In any event, the Board of Trade building opened in 1930. This is a picture of the Board of Trade. I worked here almost a decade. For a lot of years, it was the tallest building in Chicago. Today, it's dwarfed by a number of other buildings. But in terms of futures trading today, that whole pit scene, the floor, the yelling and the shouting, all of that started to come unwound in 1992 when the CME, the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, introduced Globex, which was an electronic platform for matching buy and sell orders. So from there, basically, we went from in 2015 they closed the ag futures pits, and in 2020 they closed the ag option pits, and it was actually COVID that closed those pits. But that was the end of 172 years of open outcry in the agricultural markets. And today it's all done by computer. All the orders are matched electronically. It's more efficient, it's faster, it's more accessible. A farmer with his iPhone in the combine, if he thinks he's got a good yield and the price is going to go down, he can call an order in the Chicago Board of Trade, and before that combine wheel goes around one turn, he's got to fill. Amazing. But as an aftermath of all of this, only 5%, less than 5% of those folks you saw making a pretty good living on the floor because they could sense the emotion, the feel, the order flow. When the pits closed, less than 1 in 20 of them who went upstairs and tried to trade these markets just off a computer screen, only less than 1 in 20 could make a living at it. And certainly the CME, though, loves it. It's a publicly traded company, Chicago Mercantile Exchange, and their green contract volume is 2 to 3 times higher today than it was when we had open outcry. Okay, let's wrap this up here with some challenges facing the U.S. grain industry, and specifically the next Secretary of Agriculture. As you have learned in this presentation, U.S. corn and soybean yields are steadily increasing, while the U.S. share of global exports is shrinking. As I've indicated prior here, we're likely to see further gains in exports of corn and soybeans out of Brazil, with all of their undeveloped land still potentially able to come online. And of course, Russian wheat exports are likely to continue to expand. And certainly China, the world's largest corn importer, if indeed they do start embracing GMO corn varieties, it's possible by the year 2030 that they will not need to import any corn at all. That's going to have a substantial impact on the global corn market. And in terms of production, as I've amply demonstrated, production is going to continue to outpace growth in population. There's going to be no food shortages that we can see coming up, which leads us down to the point that we're going to have to find more domestic uses of corn, soybeans, and wheat. Part of that, of course, could come from livestock, but growth in livestock use of corn and soybean meal is going to hinge on higher meat exports, and that's where the U.S. trade policy is going to be critical in coming years to push more of our livestock product into global markets. Now, if we are indeed on a glide path, absent any severe droughts, to lower prices, is that going to trigger more conversion of cropland to wind and solar? Well, possibly some, but I don't think it's going to be a tidal wave. I can share with you that my cousin I referenced earlier, that's a hog farmer and a large grain farmer in Western Illinois, has been offered a 20-year contract to convert his entire land to solar with a payment rate 3 times larger than what land rents are. However, there is certainly a risk in any long-term contracts given the increasing cloud of the rising federal debt and the Social Security time fuse, which is growing closer the next 10 or 12 years unless something is done. Social Security benefits will be cut automatically. So I would just submit, if you're in Congress and asked to vote whether or not to continue subsidies to solar and wind versus continuing Social Security payments, you're probably going to vote with the vote to keep Social Security going. One point about the wind turbines, their useful life is just 20 years, maybe a little bit more. And for every one of the turbines that they're putting in now, it requires 1,800 tons of concrete, 135 tons of rebar, and folks living close to those wind turbines are reporting issues with their eardrums. So that is certainly not a long-term extended solution. But in any event, I hope this presentation has given you something to think about, given you some perspectives you did not have before, and just make it useful for you enter into conversations about U.S. food supply, global grain trade, and it's been my pleasure to bring these points to your attention. And I've enjoyed putting this presentation together, and certainly thank you for listening patiently to all of my points. So we'll just end it there.